Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Fierce Women TV. I am Christina Aldan, your host, and we are talking about the concepts of mentorship, leadership, and men as allies, just like the Fierce Women Project. Today, I am interviewing the wonderful Mr. George J. Chanos. He's an author, a speaker, entrepreneur, former Nevada Attorney General. We're going to talk about some cool stuff today. I'm excited. Welcome, George.
Thank you. And an ally.
And an ally. That's right. And a strong ally. That's terrific. That's absolutely right. Now, George, you've done a lot of stuff, and we've had such great conversations in the years that I've known you. That's why I invited you to come in. You know, you brought Capriotti's from 40 locations to you're up to what
110.
110 now as chairman of the board. You successfully brought cases before the U.S. Supreme Court and won 9. All
9-0.
9-0. That's pretty good.
One case unanimously, 9-0.
That's a good record. That's a good record. And you know, in your entrepreneurial journey and all of it, you've learned so many cool things. I'm really excited to talk about all of them today. Your books and all of your advice. I like to start with the same question I always start with, and that is, what's your definition of a fierce woman?
Well, when I think of a fierce woman, I actually think of two people. I think of my mother. My mother was a model in the 1950s in Chicago.
Yeah.
And in the 1950s, there weren't that many career women.
That's right.
Not as many as there are today, certainly. And so she was a bit of a pioneer.
Yeah.
And she was very creative, very ambitious. She was driven. She wanted more out of life for herself and for her family and for her children.
Yeah.
And so she was a career woman, one of the early career women in this country.
I love that.
So I think of her when I think of a fierce woman. And I think of my daughter, Alexandra, when I think of a fierce woman.
Yes.
My ex, who is a great friend of mine, we're still very close, still very good friends. She's a district court judge, Adriana Escobar. She used to say that my daughter Alex was the only person that I feared.
Oh.
And that was when she was 4.
Fierce.
Yeah, and that was when she was about 4 years old. So Alexandra was like a freight train.
Yeah.
No did not mean no. And she just persevered.
I think I got one of those at home now, actually, myself.
Yeah, she just went after what she wanted, and she didn't take no for an answer. And she was irrepressible.
Yeah.
And so that's my definition of a fierce woman.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I've met Alex. I've spent time with Alex, and she really is. I can contest. I can agree. Yes, I can confirm. She is definitely a fierce woman.
And then my wife is a fierce woman, but only with me.
Oh. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, but your wife is very kind and sweet. You're like, no, she'll eat me.
She's very kind and sweet with everyone else, but she's not afraid to come after me.
That's great. That's great. That's wonderful. You know, through your book, because you're the only person that I know on the planet that I've met, and I've met a lot of people, that wakes up with joy every morning to just consume media.
I do.
And I know this about you. You are a person who really evaluates positions based on their merit, based on their values, based on the end goals. Tell us about, you know, your first book that you wrote, Seize Your Destiny, and how you brought that information in. You know, there's so much global awareness that you have about the state of business, the state of politics, and, you know, with your first book, tell us some of the core values that you decided to write about in your research.
Okay. So Seize Your Destiny came about when I had a heart attack.
Yeah.
It was in 2012, November of 2012, and I had lived an extraordinary life, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I had this heart attack.
Yeah.
And it's a wake-up call. You know, it makes you think, and it makes you concerned that it could happen again, and you start to realize that life is fragile and that you can't take it for granted, and that you have to plan for contingencies. And so at the time, my daughter was only 16 years old. And I was concerned that as I put my affairs in order and I was leaving what I had accumulated to my daughter, what was she going to do? How was she going to manage her affairs when she's 16 and she doesn't quite know that much about what's going on? She's very young. And I also thought that she would have questions that would arise, and that normally she would refer to me and ask her father, help and guidance on some of these issues. But what if I wasn't there?
Right.
So I started to write her a letter. And as I was writing that letter, I wanted it to be substantive. I wanted to try to anticipate what her questions to me might be over the next 20 years if I wasn't there. What would those questions look like? Yeah. And what would the next 20 years look like in her life? And so it wasn't just an I love you letter. It was here's what you need to do to survive and thrive in a rapidly changing and radically changing environment that you're going to be living in.
Yeah.
So that's what Seize Your Destiny became. Ultimately, as I was writing the letter, I looked down and I was at over 100 pages, and I realized this isn't a letter anymore. This is really a book.
Yes.
And then I realized that there were other young people that could profit from this book in addition to my daughter. And so I changed it around a little bit and made it a book. And so that's what Seize Your Destiny is, and I've left that to my daughter as part of my legacy. And I hope that over the next 20 or 30 years, she'll be able to go back and refer to it. It will guide her from this point forward as part of her life lessons. And when she has questions, and if I'm not around and she'd like to know what her dad would have said or what her dad would have done, refer to the book and it'll tell you.
No, it's great. I like, you broken up certain chapters in here for different things, and also even on your website you have different writings, different articles about values, about certain things that you've written in the book, character, and all of those things. So it's really cool. When we're talking about the future, we're talking about young women and young girls in the future. What is your hope for young girls and young women in the best way to support them in that success? And to, sometimes people will say things like, well, it's confidence that they need. Sometimes people say, well, they need certain support systems. What do you hope to support the future of our young next generation for women, and how young men can support them as well?
So I think that, first of all human beings, in order to succeed, will do so essentially with the same formula, whether you're a man or a woman.
Oh yes, get your pen and paper ready, everybody.
Yeah. and it's not so much that there is a magic 1, 2, 3 or 5-point formula that I can point out that this is all you need to do.
Yeah.
But essentially there are key components. If you look historically, if you look back at people who have written self-help and personal development books, back from Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill forward through the people that are speaking today, there are certain commonalities that run generation through generation. Some of these things include courage. You mentioned courage. Yes. Courage is essential, right? So you have to have the courage to overcome your fears, to step out of your comfort zone, to do things that are risks to you. And you have to be willing to embrace failure as a part of learning. It's not that we should welcome failure. We try to pivot, we try to avoid it, we try to circumvent it whenever possible. But when it comes, you have to use it to your advantage. Everything that comes into your life, whether it's lemons or oranges, you have to use. And so courage is essential. The ability to overcome your fears, take chances, take action. Taking action is necessary. We can talk about things forever.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
I speak at conferences, and sometimes I'll go to conferences, and then I'll go to the next conference, and then I'm seeing the same. And it's like they're getting ready to get ready. You know, there's another thing, and I'm gonna launch as soon as I learn this trick, and then this trick, and then this.
Exactly. And what I've found, so what I've found in almost every endeavor that I've pursued, is that incrementally you grow and you become more formidable as you progress. So I did an interview the other day with Ninan, and I talked about a baby going up a flight of steps, and how you look at that baby and it takes the first step, and then it takes the second step, and it's looking around at its parents, and it's filled with confidence from the fact that it made it up a couple of steps, and it's looking up ahead, and ultimately it keeps going, and that experience, each one of those steps reinforces the baby's own power. And reinforces their own self-image. Well, the same is true. It's not just babies climbing steps. It's you doing anything you want to do. So I paint, I do sculptural assemblage, and I found that when I paint and when I do try to create art, that over time I get better and better at it.
Yes.
You know, it's not something that I was born with the ability to do brilliantly immediately the first time I tried.
Yeah.
But the more paintings I create, the better they get. And the same is true with oral argument in practicing law. The more oral argument I do, the better I get. The more I prepare, the better I get. And so it's the same thing in virtually anything that you would do in life. So the key is taking that first step and following it up with subsequent steps. Don't think about, you have a goal, you set a goal, and you move towards that goal. But the important point is that just take the first step, allow that to either reward you, or if you fail in any one of your steps, whether it's the first or the second or the third, allow that failure to teach you, right? So allow the success to invigorate you and push you forward to the next step, and allow that failure to teach you something about what you did wrong, so that you won't do it on the next step, and let that failure also teach you about your strength, about the fact that you are in fact a fierce woman, that you can deal with that failure, that you can overcome that failure. So by taking that action, even if it results in a failure, you're gaining something extremely valuable from it. You're gaining the recognition that you survived whatever happened, and you persevered, and you moved on. And that's important, because
I totally needed to hear this today. I'm so glad. I'm like, whatever, we're glad we have viewers today, but this is fantastic.
It gives you the courage. It gives you the courage to know not only what you can do, but what you can fail at doing and survive and persevere. And so that's as important, and
shows that you got back up again.
Absolutely.
Shows that you got back up again.
And I can tell you something. By far the greatest teacher that you will ever have is your failure. Your failures will teach you more, and they will be lasting lessons. So don't fear them
or discount them.
Embrace them, analyze them, learn from them, and let them empower you.
I love that, and I think that those are really good lessons, especially, I have a couple of partners with the FierceWomen Project for learning, and in their research, they found that a lot of things, and we'll talk about this more in our second segment as well, but a lot of millennials, they struggle with that grit almost, that perseverance, because so much of what we have today is instant gratification, or it's easy. So then lots of times they think, oh, well, I got in the pool and I didn't know how to swim, so whatever, swimming's not for me, I'm done. For me, even learning to snowboard, I had to throw myself down the mountain 3 days. I mean, before I even could get up, and it took a while, and you got to get beat up a little bit and have that learning curve and be willing. So I like that piece of advice, because I think that it's something that our future generations really need to understand.
Yeah, you raise a couple of interesting points. So Angela Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania did some important studies on grit.
Yeah,
You used
okay.
the word grit.
Yeah,
And she's a big proponent about that they took a look at a number of students, some that were very high academic achievers, some that were less successful academically.
Okay.
And they followed these kids and they saw who succeeded at college, who was able to manage their way through the process of college and overcome the obstacles that college presents and graduate.
Okay.
And she found that grit was a more accurate predictor of success among students than intelligence, for example.
Yeah.
Carol Dweck at Stanford University has done some interesting studies on the growth mindset. So Carol Dweck will tell you, don't tell your children how intelligent they are. Don't tell them how beautiful they are. Praise them for the effort that they display, the growth mindset. Her studies found that students with higher grades were less willing to take risks than students with lower grades, and so, you know, sometimes the important thing is, are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to take risks? Are you willing to move forward? And it's not always the brightest child that will do that. Sometimes it's the child that didn't do as well academically that'll be more courageous and have more grit and more determination, be more fierce, and be more successful as a consequence. So don't discount that quality. That's a huge quality. And
I love that, and I definitely know that Alex has that in her. I know that my 4-year-old has it in her. Absolutely. You know, we have you have another book coming out, and I want to just talk about that a little tiny bit let's introduce it as we go into our next segment. The name of your book, again, it's geared towards young men and young women as they're kind of navigating this difficult political environment, all of it right now, this whole world. What is the name of your book?
The new book is called Millennial Samurai.
Millennial Samurai.
Yes.
I love it. And I love also that you've created a different approach to this. And we're going to go into this in our next segment. But I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how you think that the millennials are going to do. Some people are going, oh my God, the millennials are taking over. I'm okay with it, actually. I think we're in good hands.
I think they're going to do great.
I think they're going to do great. I mean, you know, my generation did pretty well. We're doing okay. I think the millennials are going to do really well. We're going to talk about that in a moment.
I'm optimistic.
Thank you. And we'll be right back with Fierce Women TV in just a moment. Thank you.